In 1957, a struggling rock and roll singer named Harold Jenkins walked into his manager's office with a radical idea. By the time he walked out, Harold Jenkins no longer existed. In his place stood Conway Twitty, a name he spotted on a road map, combining Conway, Arkansas, and Twitty, Texas. This wasn't just a stage name, it was the first step in creating an entirely new identity that would help him build a $50 million empire. The romantic country crooner millions adored was actually a shrewd businessman who maintained separate personal and professional lives so effectively that when he died, even his closest associates were shocked by what they discovered. Harold Lloyd Jenkins was born on September 1st, 1933, in Friars Point, Mississippi. Growing up in Helena, Arkansas, he showed musical talent early, hosting a local radio show at age 12. After serving in the Korean War, he returned in 1956 to a changed music landscape dominated by rock and roll. The transformation began with a simple realization: Harold Jenkins lacked star quality. It wasn't memorable enough and failed to create the mystique necessary for stardom. A new identity was needed. The story of how he chose his new name reveals his practical nature. While many artists might select something with personal meaning, Jenkins simply looked at a roadmap. He spotted Conway, Arkansas, and Twitty, Texas, and combined them. Conway Twitty was born, a name with no personal connection but perfect for marketing purposes. This wasn't just a superficial change. Jenkins completely embraced this new identity. He had friends and family call him Conway. He signed documents as Conway. For all intents and purposes, Harold Jenkins ceased to exist in the public sphere. With strategic calculation, he made another pivotal decision in 1965 to abandon rock and roll entirely and reinvent himself as a country music artist. This wasn't driven by a sudden passion for country music. It was a business decision based on where he saw opportunity. The reinvention worked. Conway Twitty's first country single, Next in Line, reached #1 on the country charts. It was the first of an eventual 55 #1 country hits, more than any other artist, until George Strait surpassed him decades later. What makes this transformation so remarkable is how complete it was. In interviews, Conway never discussed Harold Jenkins. He created a new history, a new persona, and a new future, all built on a foundation of careful calculation rather than artistic impulse. But the creation of Conway Twitty was just the beginning of his double life. As his music career flourished, he was already laying the groundwork for something much bigger, a business empire that would operate entirely separate from his music persona. While fans were swooning over Conway's romantic ballads, few knew that behind the scenes he was building a vast business empire that had little to do with music. Conway understood something that many artists of his era didn't: that music fame was fleeting, but smart investments could provide lasting wealth. His first major venture outside music came in 1968 when he launched Twitty Bird Airlines, a small charter flight service. While the airline itself wasn't hugely successful, it revealed Conway's interest in diversifying his income streams beyond royalties and concert tickets. In 1982, Conway made his boldest business move by opening Twitty City in Hendersonville, Tennessee. This wasn't just a home or office, it was a 24-acre complex featuring Conway's mansion, offices for his business enterprises, a gift shop, and a museum dedicated to his career. Twitty City became a major tourist attraction, drawing over 100,000 visitors annually. Behind the scenes, Conway was acquiring significant real estate holdings throughout Tennessee and neighboring states. He owned shopping centers, office buildings, and undeveloped land that he would later sell at substantial profits. These investments were carefully kept separate from his public persona. Perhaps most surprising was Conway's entry into the food industry. In 1981, he co-founded Twitty Burger, a chain of fast food restaurants. When the venture failed, Conway handled it like the shrewd businessman he was, by writing off the losses on his taxes. Conway also owned United Talent, a booking agency that represented not just himself but numerous other country artists. This gave him unusual power in the industry. He wasn't just a performer, but someone who controlled access to venues and opportunities for other musicians. What made Conway's business empire remarkable wasn't just its size, but how completely he separated it from his music career. Fans who came to concerts saw the romantic balladeer, not the calculating investor. He created a firewall between Conway Twitty, the singer, and Conway Twitty, the businessman, a division that would become even more apparent in his financial maneuvers. Conway Twitty's relationship with money revealed a side of him that stood in stark contrast to his gentle public image. Behind the scenes, he was a financial strategist who understood the tax code better than many accountants and wasn't afraid to push legal boundaries to protect his wealth. The most famous example came with what's now known as the Twitty Burger case. When his fast food venture failed, Conway claimed substantial tax deductions for the money he repaid to investors. The IRS challenged these deductions, leading to a landmark tax court case. Conway's defense was that repaying investors was necessary to protect his reputation and therefore constituted a legitimate business expense. Remarkably, he won the case, establishing a tax precedent that's still cited today. Conway structured his finances through multiple corporations and business entities, each serving different purposes in his financial ecosystem. This complex structure allowed him to shift money between ventures in ways that were advantageous for tax purposes while maintaining tight control over all aspects of his empire. Unlike many celebrities who flaunted their wealth, Conway lived relatively modestly, at least by superstar standards. By avoiding ostentatious displays of wealth, he maintained his relatable image with fans while quietly amassing a fortune estimated at over $50 million at the time of his death. Conway also employed a strategy of vertical integration in his music career. By owning his publishing rights, controlling his booking through his own agency, and eventually establishing his own music venue at Twitty City, he captured revenue at multiple points in the music business chain. This financial savvy revealed the true Conway Twitty, not just a singer who happened to be good with money, but a businessman who happened to sing. The contrast between his public and private personas couldn't have been more pronounced, and nowhere was this more evident than in how he presented himself on and off stage. The Conway Twitty that fans adored was the quintessential romantic, a man who sang about love and longing with such conviction that listeners believed every word. On stage, he was warm, engaging, and seemingly vulnerable. His performances of songs like It's Only Make Believe and Slow Hand conveyed deep emotion and intimate understanding of relationships. But those who dealt with Conway in business settings encountered someone entirely different. Business associates described him as calculating, direct, and sometimes ruthless in negotiations. He was known for his laser focus on the bottom line and his unwillingness to compromise when his financial interests were at stake. This duality extended to his personal appearance. The Conway on album covers and stage wore carefully selected outfits that enhanced his romantic image. Often soft colors, fashionable but not flashy. But in business meetings, he presented himself differently. More conservative, more authoritative, with none of the vulnerability that characterized his stage presence. Even his speaking voice changed depending on which persona he was embodying. The soft, slightly hesitant voice he used in rare interviews contrasted sharply with the confident, direct tone he employed in business settings. Perhaps most telling was how Conway handled conflicts. On stage and in his public life, he avoided controversy at all costs. But in business, he was willing to engage in conflict when necessary, including taking legal action against those who crossed him financially. This stark contrast wasn't the result of dishonesty, but rather a sophisticated understanding of brand management before such concepts were common in the music industry. Conway understood that his value as an entertainer depended on maintaining a certain image, and he worked diligently to protect that image while simultaneously pursuing his business interests through a separate persona. Conway Twitty didn't just maintain different personas, he constructed entirely separate lives that rarely intersected. This separation was so complete that many people who knew him in one context had no idea about his activities in the other. His approach to privacy was methodical. Conway rarely gave interviews, and when he did, he steered conversations toward his music and away from his personal life or business ventures. Unlike many celebrities who courted media attention, Conway actively avoided it except when necessary to promote his music. Conway's physical spaces reflected this division. Twitty City, while ostensibly a tourist attraction, was designed with careful boundaries. The public areas showcased the Conway Twitty that fans knew and loved, filled with memorabilia from his music career. But the business offices were entirely separate, accessible only to those involved in his commercial ventures. His schedule was similarly compartmentalized. Conway would block out specific times for music-related activities in entirely different periods for his business pursuits. Those who worked with him noted that he seemed to switch modes completely when moving between these worlds, changing not just his focus, but his entire demeanor. Perhaps most remarkable was how Conway managed relationships. He maintained different circles of associates for different aspects of his life, and these groups rarely mixed. His music industry colleagues knew little about his business partners, and vice versa. Conway's ability to maintain these separate lives required extraordinary discipline and awareness. He was constantly mindful of which persona was appropriate in which context, never allowing the calculating businessman to appear on stage or the gentle singer to show up in negotiations. The effectiveness of this strategy became apparent only after his death, when these separate worlds suddenly collided, with consequences that would shock both his fans and his business associates. When Conway Twitty collapsed on his tour bus in June 1993, suffering from an abdominal aortic aneurysm, the carefully constructed walls between his separate lives began to crumble. His death at age 59 didn't just end a legendary music career, it triggered a series of revelations and legal battles that exposed the complexity of his double life. The first shock came with the reading of his will. Despite his business acumen, Conway died without a comprehensive estate plan. His will, last updated in 1987, failed to account for many of his business interests and didn't provide clear direction for Twitty City or his other ventures. This surprising oversight from a man known for his meticulous attention to financial details suggested that even Conway struggled to reconcile his separate worlds when planning for the future. What followed was a legal battle that tore through both his family and business relationships. Conway's widow, D. Henry Jenkins, found herself at odds with his children from previous marriages over control of his estate. The children, who had been gradually introduced to aspects of his business empire, believed they should manage his legacy. D., who had been largely shielded from Conway's business dealings during their marriage, suddenly had to navigate complex financial structures she hadn't been fully aware of. The dispute became public and messy, exactly the kind of spectacle Conway had worked so hard to avoid during his lifetime. Court filings revealed details about his business operations that had previously been kept private, including the extent of his real estate holdings and the complex ownership structures of his various enterprises. Fans who had known only the romantic balladeer were surprised to learn about the shrewd businessman who had operated behind the scenes. Twitty City became a particular point of contention. The tourist attraction had been profitable, but required significant ongoing investment to maintain. Without Conway's direct management, disagreements arose about its future. Eventually, in 1994, the property was sold to the Trinity Broadcasting Network, effectively ending the most visible symbol of Conway's business empire. Perhaps most revealing were the reactions from people in Conway's different circles. Music industry colleagues expressed surprise at the extent of his business holdings, while his business associates were often unaware of how he had presented himself in the music world. The legal proceedings brought these groups into contact for the first time, creating uncomfortable revelations about how differently Conway had appeared to each. The aftermath of Conway's death revealed the ultimate cost of his double life. When the separate worlds he had so carefully maintained finally collided, neither was fully prepared to understand or accommodate the other. The result was a legacy temporarily tarnished by conflict and confusion, a situation that the meticulous Conway would have surely worked to avoid had he lived longer. Today, nearly 3 decades after his death, Conway Twitty's legacy has largely been reclaimed by his music rather than the business controversies that followed his passing. With 55 #1 country singles, he remains one of the most successful recording artists in country music history. Songs like Hello Darlin' and I'd Love to Lay You Down continue to define the romantic side of country music, influencing generations of artists who followed. Yet Conway's double life offers fascinating insights into the nature of celebrity, identity, and the music business itself. In many ways, he was ahead of his time, understanding concepts like brand management and vertical integration before they became industry standards. Modern country stars who build business empires around their music, from Dolly Parton to Toby Keith, follow a path that Conway helped pioneer, even if they approach it more openly than he did. The complete transformation from Harold Jenkins to Conway Twitty also raises questions about authenticity in country music, a genre that has always prized genuineness and connection to roots. Conway's calculated approach to his career challenges the notion that great country music must come from unfiltered authenticity. His success suggests that artistry and strategy aren't mutually exclusive, that the emotions in his songs could be genuine even if the persona delivering them was carefully constructed. Conway's business ventures, once seen as side projects to his music career, now appear prescient. His understanding that music fame could be leveraged into other opportunities anticipated the modern celebrity entrepreneur. Today's artists who launch clothing lines, spirits brands, or production companies are following a diversification strategy that Conway employed decades earlier. Perhaps the most enduring aspect of Conway's legacy is the reminder that public figures contain multitudes. The contrast between his romantic stage persona and his business acumen wasn't necessarily a contradiction. It was a reflection of the complexity that exists in many successful people. Conway wasn't being dishonest when he sang love songs. He was simply expressing one facet of himself while keeping others private. For fans discovering Conway Twitty today, knowing about his double life doesn't diminish his music. It adds depth to our understanding of the man behind it. The songs remain powerful regardless of whether they were sung by Harold Jenkins or Conway Twitty, by the romantic balladeer or the shrewd businessman. In the end, perhaps the most remarkable achievement of Conway's double life was that both sides contributed to a legacy that continues to resonate in American music. Conway Twitty's story is ultimately about transformation and duality, about a man who reinvented himself so completely that his original identity nearly vanished from history. Harold Jenkins didn't just adopt a stage name. He created Conway Twitty as a complete persona and lived within that creation for decades. Yet behind this carefully crafted image was another self equally real and equally important to understanding the full man. What makes Conway's double life so fascinating isn't that he had business interests outside of music. Many artists do. It's the complete separation he maintained between these worlds, and how thoroughly he committed to each role he played. On stage, he was the romantic crooner who understood the depths of love and heartbreak. In the boardroom, he was the calculating businessman with an eye for opportunity and a mind for strategy. Few people ever saw both sides simultaneously. This separation served him well during his lifetime. It allowed him to build a music career based on emotional connection while simultaneously constructing a business empire based on pragmatic decisions. It protected his romantic image from being complicated by his business dealings, and it kept his business reputation from being undermined by perceptions of him as just an entertainer. But this same separation created complications after his death, when these worlds collided in ways he hadn't fully prepared for. The legal battles and public disputes that followed revealed the cost of living a divided life. When the walls between his separate identities finally fell, neither side had a complete picture of the whole man. Today, we can appreciate Conway Twitty not just for his music or his business acumen, but for the remarkable balancing act he maintained throughout his career. In an era before personal branding became a common concept, he intuitively understood how to create and maintain a public image while pursuing private goals. He recognized that different aspects of his life required different approaches, and he had the discipline to keep these aspects separate for decades. Perhaps the most important lesson from Conway Twitty's double life is that public figures are always more complex than they appear. Behind every carefully crafted image is a real person with multiple dimensions, motivations, and interests. Conway simply took this universal truth to an extreme, creating a division so complete that it's still being reconciled years after his death. The man who sang "Hello, Darlin'" to millions may have been a creation, but the emotions he conveyed were real. The businessman who built Twitty City may have operated in the shadows, but his achievements were substantial. Together, these two sides of Conway Twitty created a legacy that transcends both, a testament to the power of reinvention and the complexity of identity in American music.